Good afternoon. We're going to call the meeting to order. And Madam Clerk, could you give us a roll call, please?
Board Member Chavez?
Here.
Board Member Gregoric? Board Member McDonald?
Here.
Board Member Shoemaker?
Here.
Board Member Stewart?
Here.
Board Member Sykes? And Chair Sutkin.
Here. Okay, let us rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Luz Maria, would you like to lead us today, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda? Here's Mr. Sykes. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, ma'am, there's not. Mr. Sykes has arrived.
Yeah, I get that. I would just want to make sure that item B is on our business calendar, not consent calendar. Okay, we'll hold that for discussion. Okay, welcome. And I have two cards from the public, so we'll call them up. I have Alfonso Somieta and John Shoemaker.
Good afternoon, this is Alfonso Somieta. I'm here on behalf of the Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio of the 48th Assembly District. And I am here in support of her strong support for the City of West Covina's purchase of the parcel north of the former BKK landfill from the West Covina successor agency. City of West Covina has been financially responsible for 13.5.
Can I give you a timeout for a second? He probably should be testifying when the agenda item comes up. Brett,
is that what it is? I'm sorry.
This is public comments. So.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So that way it's on the record related to that agenda.
No worries. A couple minutes.
Yeah.
Take that minute.
Any other general public comment? Any other general public comment? No? Okay. Then we'll have comment after our discussion item. So the first consent item is the minutes. We have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay, second?
Second, please.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstains?
Abstain.
Okay, okay. That's approved.
Yeah, I wasn't here last time.
Okay, now we'll go to item B, and I'm sure we would like to begin with a city staff presentation.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. We would like to do a presentation trying to address a couple of different items with regards to the long-range property management plan for the disposition of the BKK properties. What I have is Ms. Morales has put together a PowerPoint that we're going to kind of walk through with the community as well as the board. But before we get to that, the reason this has come back before you this evening is at one of your previous meetings, the Oversight Board took a position to require, the city from any proceeds from the sale of any of the properties located at the former BKK site that they be dedicated to pay down the debt of the city. That was specifically with regards to the water tank properties, and the motion also included the 3 properties that are before you this evening. So we decided to go back to the City Council as the successor agency and share with them this direction that was provided to them from the Oversight Board with their understanding that as a condition of the purchase of the property, any and all proceeds from that sale are to go to pay down the debt of the bonds that were issued on the property. As such, it's before you this evening. I have had a chance to have a brief conversation with Chair Sutkin yesterday to try to provide a little bit of history and an outline of how we got where we are today. So I'm going to turn my back to you for a moment as we go through the PowerPoint and at the same time use a wireless microphone. So just a second. So just as a recollection, back in 2002, 2003, the redevelopment agency purchased approximately 231 acres of property for $6.2 million. That includes all the property, which is the Heights Shopping Center, Big League Dreams, and the property that is on the agenda this evening, and the water tank properties that we've talked previously about. As part of that requirement, BKK was to dedicate all money from the sale of that property to go towards the mitigation and ongoing maintenance of the landfill property. In September 2006, the agency sold 5.8 acres for the office complex development to M&A Gabay, or the Charles Company, for $1.2 million. They also, as we mentioned, have that requirement to purchase the water tank properties and to build the water tanks for their project, as well as any future development up on top of the landfill. Later in October 2006, agency sold 43 acres to the Heights of West Covina for $8.8 million. So agency made a profit of approximately $4.1 million. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands the redevelopment agency at that time didn't lose any funds from the purchase of the deal. There was actually a profit made. Were you going to ask a question? Yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, as I remind myself, my role here is to represent the county as one of the taxing agencies and to try to see if there could be some kind of, I've heard the term waterfall, maybe that's not the official term, but some kind of a trickle down at the end after you know, the city covers its costs and you have your administrative costs so that the taxing agencies, including the county, but not only the county, receive some financial benefit. That's what I've seen on other oversight boards with the sale of properties, and so that's kind of, you know, that's kind of the
right, and we're going to get to that. I'll help you address that. So, okay. As we continue, so the agency made a profit of about $4.1 million. The agency will fully reimburse for sale of sites, generating millions of dollars of sales and property tax for the taxing entities. So when the Heights Shopping Center was developed in Bigley Dreams, now Bigley Dreams is a city park, so it doesn't generate property tax. The Heights Shopping Center generates a significant amount of property tax as well as sales tax for all the taxing entities, not just for the city, but for the county, school district, and whatnot. In addition, Bigley Dreams also generates sales tax. Not a lot, but a somewhat from their snack bar operations, and they do have a little commercial enterprise there as well. So there are sales tax generated there. The rest of the site doesn't generate any property tax or sales tax because it's never been developed. So that's important because, as Ms. Sunken mentioned, there is, I want to make sure it's clear, the county and the taxing agencies have not lost any revenue for the fact that this has been owned previously by the former redevelopment agency. It hasn't generated revenues in any way. Okay, so that means none of the taxing entities have lost out of any of the profits from this project.
But back to when the funds were used to purchase the property, those were redevelopment agency funds, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But that, again, remember, we're trying to focus on what happened from the dissolution of redevelopment. Anything happened prior was, I mean, again, was still within the guidelines of redevelopment and what was state law at the time.
But in this particular case, because the board voted to retire the city's debt from the previous action, that's creating, I think, this perception that the property is being sold for nothing and the city is not benefiting. And so I just want that to be clear that that's a recommendation that's contained within here.
Well, let me see if we address that in a few more minutes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the agency put the sale proceeds towards Bigley Dreams development. Why that's important is Bigley Dreams was a redevelopment project. It is on the ROPS. So if the city, they couldn't have taken that money and put it in the city's coffers because it was redevelopment profit. By putting it back into the project, it reduced the liabilities or the potential bonding, which would still be being paid on the ROPS. So it'll help pay down that initial cost for that project. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. The golf course development. And this is based on information contained in the staff report when the city was looking to do the golf course and when they approved the bonds initially back in 2004. The golf course project at that time was estimated to cost $31.7 million to construct. Financing of the project with $26 million was going to be done with lease revenue bonds. The funding source was going to be revenue generated from the golf course. But as we know, the golf course was never developed. All right. So what we're saying is phase one was site preparation. Phase one includes the Series A and B bonds, which had a value of $13.5 million. That is what the city bonded for. That was funded, and the debt service is being paid to date. Phase two, which was the infrastructure for the golf course construction, was another $15.1 million at that time. Granted, it'd be a lot more expensive today. But again, that project's not moving forward. So that debt was never incurred, but the infrastructure was. Yes, ma'am.
Could you help me, since I need to understand the redevelopment agency debt versus city debt?
Sure.
The Bigley Dreams debt
Was redevelopment responsibility, or redevelopment debt.
and so that payment continues, it will
It's
continue
on
in
your
the ROPS.
pre-approved ROPS,
And
yes,
how much
ma'am.
is that each year? Just remind me.
I don't, do you have the ROPS with you by chance?
More or less? Okay, all right, okay. And
I don't know how
then,
you're gonna pull it up if you're on the PowerPoint. Okay.
And then the debt service on the golf course,
Is approximately 400,000 of the city's coffers, not on redevelopment. And the reason is, it goes back to when you incur that debt, it's gonna be a municipal golf course. Municipal golf course means the city owned it and operated, or having some sort of management firm operate it. And the cost of the revenues generated was supposed to go pay for that, offsetting the cost of those bonds at that time.
which were lease revenue bonds.
Yes.
Which are not redevelopment type bonds, correct? So that, because it's a municipal function, it was kind of treated as a municipal asset and therefore eligible for these other kinds of public
Correct.
financing?
What's it?
Am I wrong?
Yeah, the 2004 bonds were issued by the City of West Covina Financing Authority, and it was based on the city leasing property or the financing authority leasing from the city, and that's where the income came from at that time, which was then going to be transferred over to the revenues generated from the golf course. And because the golf course was going to remain a municipal facility, that's why it remained a city bond.
All right, go to the next slide. Maybe. There we go. So golf course costs to date. So we mentioned again, 2004 Series A and B bonds. They're at a variable interest rate, which is the lowest interest rates out there on the market today, which is around 1.5 to 3.3% during the life of the bonds at the point. If the city was to refinance that debt, we're looking around 4 to 5%. It would probably be the current interest rates. 2004 bonds were pledged and paid for by the general fund. Annual payments, apologize, it was $500,000. The actual for fiscal year 16-17 was $564. To date, we've paid almost $500,000 of city's general fund towards the debt service. And the interest owed, now, when you buy a bond, it's not just the 13.5, that's the money, but also the interest. So the interest projected back then when the project was developed and issued to bonds was going to be another $8 million in interest. Yes, ma'am.
So this is a city bond.
Yes.
And it was issued by the West Covina Financing Authority.
Which is the city.
Okay, and they know that this is not generating revenue, right?
At that time, that's correct.
No, now, do they know?
Oh, yeah, the city council knows that, yes.
No, are they the financing authority?
They are.
Oh, it's a city council.
Authority is formed by.
Okay.
Financing authority is formed by two agencies within the city. It's a joint powers authority. And I don't know about West Covina, but normally it's the redevelopment agency in the city that formed the financing authority.
Council.
And it's just
Well, I was
a
just,
conduit for
I mean, wondering, but aren't you then kind of in non-compliance with your bonds if you haven't produced?
Yeah, I mean, that's a more interesting question, what the covenants are and what the security is under the bond.
Right, so as long as the bond payments are being made, there isn't a jeopardy, it has not been an issue. The infrastructure work that was a promise under that initial bond has been done.
But couldn't you go back? It looked like you've only paid 2016, 17, and now this year.
No, that was just, we're just giving
What
showing the last couple of years. No, bond payments are current.
So what's left? Does that show? Your principal and your,
We're getting that, so it's coming up on a future slide.
All right.
So go ahead and go to the next slide.
okay.
All right, so agency asset cost versus value. All right, so expenditure principal payments made are $3.7 million. We still have an outstanding principal of $9.79 million. Outstanding interest around $8 million. Cost of retention basin and fencing. And what I mean by that is that has been an item that's been on the ROPS, but we keep requesting from the Department of Finance. They have denied that. If the city acquires a property through the action today, that means, actually not just today, it'd be your action and it has to go back to council for approval. They will take on that responsibility to fix the retention basin and put up the fencing.
Wait, could you back up?
Yep.
The Department of Finance has not approved that as an expense on the ROPS.
Correct.
The repairs.
That's correct.
And what's the total amount of the repairs?
$75,000. We've been asking for that for, what, a year and a half, 2 years?
3.
3 years, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, the Department of Finance has taken the position that those are betterments, improvements to the property, and therefore, even though they're necessary because the environmental agencies have told us that, they won't allow the agency to actually do the work.
Because it doesn't sound like it's winding down, and it's vacant, and they want you to just sell it and not incur any more costs?
Yeah, you don't get to.
Makes sense to me.
It's as silly as it sounds, you don't get to incur more costs improving the property in order to increase the value. DOF won't allow that as a route. I mean, you can spend the money and do it,
Well,
but
from their money, but I don't know. El Monte had, one of their properties, there was a fire, and it was damaged, and they came in and asked for money on it. They said the Department of Finance approved that.
Well, I can't, go ahead.
Unfortunately, the Department of Finance has taken the position, despite the fact that Cal Recycle and DTSC have communicated to the Department of Finance that these are not improvements, but are repairs and safety measures that are necessary from an environmental and legal standpoint. They still won't fund the request. So we think they're wrong, but that's their position.
But again, they also know that you're paying $565,000 a year just for the money, right?
I don't know that Department of Finance has our bonds on their radar at all.
I mean, I'm just, it's like $75,000 for something you own and you're already in
No, we
debt.
don't own, that's the difficulty.
Well,
That's what
it's
we're
a
trying to
municipal-
acquire.
You've been calling it a municipal facility,
I-
but you've been calling it a municipal facility since 2004. Your council has, no?
No, it's accessory to property, we've been quite clear on that.
But, I mean, it's a municipal project.
But hold,
ahead.
I have
Okay,
a
sorry,
clarifying
sorry.
question. Because I'm not clear, where the golf course is, I do not believe is the same parcel where the retention basin and everything else is supposed to be. The fence is supposed to be blocking off
that's right.
the other part of the property from the parcel.
It's not about the golf course, it's actually all along the southern rim of the golf course.
But it's not on the parcels that we are actually talking about.
But it's just like if you have your own property, your fence, you're still responsible for your fencing.
Where are they then? Can you show?
Except the fence was supposed to be put up on the city's property where it is, and the cap was supposed to be put on. It's been closed since 1994. I know BKK has been in bankruptcy and things like that, but in 20 years, the fence hasn't been put up. The retention basin has issues. I mean, in the staff report that was actually part of the city council meeting, they talk about the fact that it was installed incorrectly. And so.
And actually, I'll address that when we get to that as well. But yeah, regardless, the $75,000, the city's going to take on that responsibility and resolve that issue because we think it's important to do as part of this acquisition.
Okay, good.
All right, so that puts the total cost of the city for the golf course assets around $22 million when everything's said and done.
One quick question on
Yes,
that
ma'am.
one. If the city's going to take that on, how? I mean, I understand that we'll transfer these 3 parcels and the other one that has all of that is already the city, but how is the city going to do that? Is that part of the agreement with Singpoli to purchase the property? They have to do this? I mean, because the appraisal for this property doesn't leave extra money once you put it towards the bonds to do that.
No, this is going to be an expenditure the city's going to incur at this time to provide for the safety of the community up there on our own personal property now.
Yeah,
And that's already budgeted?
it's not, but you can't put it in the budget. It would be in next year's budget, but you can't put it in the budget until you actually own that asset, and then it can be put on the capital improvement plan.
So when are we going to talk about that parcel? Because that parcel that has the basin is not part of these.
It is,
parcels.
Mike.
Can you show?
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there it is. So sure, I guess we don't have a pointer. Where the orange and blue intersect, that is where the retention basin is, kind of like near the top left. I'll be the pointer. So right above my finger, where the blue and orange intersect, not to where the not over to where the water tank property is. Well, there it goes.
No, I was gonna see if I can, right here.
Oh, if you can bring it in?
So that area.
Where's the water tank property?
The water tank properties are right here.
And the other piece you pointed to then is part of the...
So it's right here, so it's on what is it, successor agency properties, orange, and then the licensed area that's licensed by the successor agency.
So it's the intersection of the orange and blue. Department of Finance has taken the opinion that since it lies on both properties, that both people should be responsible. And we're saying that's fine, give us a portion of it from the successor agency. But they've denied to do that even as well.
Who's the license to?
Well, it's BKK's property.
But it's licensed,
It's owned by BKK.
Yes.
it's owned by BKK and licensed by the successor agency.
So we've said that at least give half of the cost, and the other half we go after BKK for through what we call the Land for Enforcement Agency, the LEA. That's the government arm that the state established to monitor the landfill. Did it help answer those questions? Yes? Okay. Just making sure. As everyone knows, this is a very, very complicated site and project. All right. Was there any other slides that you skipped to get to this?
No, that was it, and then we have the St. Clair proposal.
Yes, and then I wanted to spend a couple of minutes providing you an update that was shared with the City Council on Tuesday night, if we would like to do that. Madam Chair?
No problem.
Okay.
Any questions on this portion?
Okay.
Can we get the rocks amount for the 14?
Nope.
I believe it was, it was 1.2 for the year that we requested.
That's the...
Debt service. It was a $30 million project?
I don't
For big league
Big
dreams.
streams, I'd have to try.
Was that 26? Get the number memorized. I'm sorry. All right. Passed out to the board, and I think members of the community, do you have a copy of Tuesday's report as well? Okay. So Tuesday night, the City Council received an update from city staff. Actually, I can switch back to the regular mic.
Do you want me to move that?
Yeah, do you have passing already? Okay, let's do that real quick.
Oh, I'm going to take advantage of you, Mr. Freeman.
What's that?
I'm going to take advantage of the
Please
minute.
do.
So the 1.2 million is just the annual debt service.
Correct.
And is the city making money on that facility?
It generates revenue about $400,000 a year.
And so is that working for you? I mean, is that the intent?
That's an odd question to ask. I think that those of the members of the community understand that when the project was developed, there was an analysis done of two things. One is if the city built a complex similar to a Big League Dreams, or if a Big League Dreams was being built, that the cheaper of the two was to have a Big League Dreams that was developed and managed by another company. Okay? Of those two choices. Now, there could have been other choices that could have been done up there, but at that time, the City Council made a decision that they wanted Big League Dreams. By itself, it generates $400,000, but again, as you saw, the debt on the property is greater than that. And the debt doesn't get paid off, I apologize on the date in front of me, but not for some time.
So the general fund carries the debt service then? Or
No,
is
the
it-
ROBS is paying for that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
No, I'm sorry. Okay.
Remember, those are redevelopment
I
agency
forgot,
bonds.
sorry.
yeah, no problem.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
So what I want to go to is, for those of you who have the Tuesday staff report that was provided to the City Council, what this was the City Council gave direction to city staff and Singpoli to meet with 4 environmental agencies that have oversight interests on the BKK properties. Okay? Specifically, those 4 groups include LA Regional Water Quality Control Board, Department of Toxic Substance Control, and Cal Recycle. That's 3 of them. The 4th one was U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. What I'm going to try and do is, do you want me to go through, would you like to go through each item, or do you want me to summarize? Summarize? All right. So the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board, their concern is what happens to water on the site, okay? Because when it rains, which it does rain here in California occasionally, they want to make sure that the water gets off the landfill as quickly as possible, and then once that water comes off the landfill, that it's being taken care of and treated and not put any kind of, deposits into our regional streams or ocean ways. Their comments and concerns are they want to be part of the design process to make sure that there's a limited amount of opportunities for water to get into the landfill. Water on top of a landfill is bad. Water inside of a landfill is worse. And the reason that's the case is water acts as a catalyst to help with the decomposition of trash. Okay, when that happens, it generates more methane and more liquid, which is called leachate. That means they have to be able to take those items out of the landfill itself. Okay, so they want to make sure that water coming onto the landfill or being infiltrated is gone. So in the design that's being wholly presented, a couple of concerns they had are having a lake on top of the Class 3 landfill, and then another lake adjacent to the landfill. Okay, so their suggestion is either take them out, or you're going to have to do some serious reinforcement, not just like a swimming pool. You're going to have to go above and beyond that of a swimming pool to make sure that there's no leaks. Because if an earthquake hits, cracks the foundation of the pool, you're going to get leaks. Okay, so they were making sure that if you're going to do anything of water features that, you have to go above and beyond, and they'll provide design standards for that purpose. DTSC, which is Department of Toxic and Substance Control, and Cal Recycle. DTSC and Cal Recycle are overseeing the landfills themselves. Cal Recycle is responsible for the municipal waste or the Class 3 landfill, which means the area where the licensed area on the top deck of the landfill, that is the Class 3. So if we go back, Paulina, to the site plan, or if you leave it there, you can leave that one there, that's fine.
There we go.
Okay, the blue area up there is the area of the Class 3 landfill. There's two distinct landfills there if you're familiar with the past. You'll see the contours there, where the blue area, that's municipal waste. That's trash people put on their side yard, okay, and people will come pick it up. The other area is the area that's in the brown, which is the toxic waste landfill, which is the Class 1 landfill, all right? The Class 3 landfill, again, Cal Recycle. Class 1 is DTSC. So they have separate interests, but yet they're both in the meeting together, all right? On the Class 3 landfill, actually, I'm going to talk about the jointly. Jointly right now, DTSC and Cal Recycle are working together to find and design a new collection of methane system and leachate. What they're finding is the system out there is, it's getting old, it's been there for many, many years. So what they wish to do is replace the system. And that's going to cost lots of money, okay? That is the responsibility of the potential responsible parties, or what's called PRPs, okay? They've got what's called a working group up there of the contaminators. So these are Fortune 500 companies, big names that have all this money in the world, we think, but they're the ones paying for the cleanup of the Class 1. They're responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the Class 1, ongoing monitoring of everything from the methane, groundwater, leachate, all that stuff. So that's what they're responsible on Class 1. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, do you have a consultant that helps you understand the reports back and the activity?
Yes, we have two different consultants that work on that. We have a gentleman named Steve Samaniego. He has his own private company called Rincon Environmental, which is actually on your ROPS as part of the successor agency. He used to be in charge for the city many years ago of the landfill when it's open and when it would close as well, the post-closure actions of it. In addition, we have a separate environmental council which serves as what's called the Landfill Enforcement Agency, or LEA. That is a state authorized entity here locally that we are able to hire a consultant that stays on top of BKK to make sure that they are maintaining the landfill according to the post-closure plan that they have on file.
Okay, very good.
Okay. So I think that was, yes, ma'am.
Wouldn't the cap and the retaining wall be part of BKK doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Well, no, because that's
Maintaining?
the cap in that?
Yes.
Well, I haven't got to the cap yet.
Okay.
Okay.
But the catch basin?
The catch basin, that's been part of the argument is portion, but again, part of it is on the successor agency property too. And again, the fencing.
But it was all BKK property.
At one time it was.
And so.
But you also got to remember, BKK.
The agreement to close down and the things they had to do would survive being transferred to RDA and the successor
Don't
agency.
disagree. I don't disagree. But again, part of the argument that is that the fencing separates both properties. So there's a joint responsibility.
No.
So yeah, go ahead.
If the whole property was BKK.
Yeah, I think I can address the question. You're absolutely correct. But as long as BKK is in bankruptcy and there's a limited fund that's available to actually make maintain and do the things that they're supposed to do, there's no money available to us.
And how active have we been in attending hearings or filing motions in the bankruptcy court explaining that, you know, the Class 1 landfill needs the catch basin enforced correctly and there needs to be a fence?
That's really a Cal Recycle issue, although they've told us that they want it done and they'd like our LEA to also enforce. And so we've been discussing actually moving forward with that. If this transfer takes place, it'll be a city responsibility and it won't be necessary, except to the extent that any part of it remains on the BKK site. And in that case, like the retention basin, we would still want to get a portion of that either from the insurance funds that are available to BKK or through the bankruptcy court.
And why is it taking so long to get the reports from DTSC? Is it because they need to do testing over a period of time? Or,
Right.
Because, I mean, one says it was a decree in 2010 and we may have the investigation by the end of 2018. One was 2015 and a minimum of 2 years until we get the report.
Right, if we can describe that, the city attorney can interject as well. Those aren't studies, those are what's called consent decrees. Those are actually legal agreements between the potential responsible parties and DTSC and Cal Recycle. They're not actually studies. What'll happen is...
Well, I'm calling them studies because they're to fund groundwater contamination investigations.
They are,
Yeah.
and what the consent decrees require is that those studies be conducted. They are being conducted. It takes a long time because of there's a lot of monitors. They had to first design the system, then they have to test it, then they have to design what it is that they think needs to be done. And so it's a multi-step process. We wish it could go faster, but unfortunately...
I'm sure the residents who live in and around it would appreciate it going a lot faster.
I'm sure they would. Unfortunately, we don't have any control over how quickly Cal Recycle or DTSC moves forward with those.
Thank you.
And then on the Class 3 landfill, as Ms. Shoemaker brought up, is the comment here that was made, agencies are concerned the final cap and cover were not completed properly and will ensure any future development brings the cap and cover to required standards. All right, and I did have a discussion with Ms. Sutkin on that as well. So what we did is we reached out to Cal Recycle today, and I actually spoke to Peter Jan. Peter is with Cal Recycle, and he's the project manager for the site. All right, so I asked him for clarification on the comments that we had summarized, and here is his comments. The landfill cap and closure were completed and do not pose any health risk to the community. Some folks at our council meeting on Tuesday were concerned that, well, if the cap's not complete, that means, are we worried about toxic waste coming out or anything like that? That's not the case. There are times during heavy storms that we see a spike in leachate and methane collection disposal, which shows water infiltration is occurring. Okay? They haven't been identified necessarily where that's coming from, but that's something that they wish to look at. That could be coming from, you know, the cap. It could be coming from the sides of it. We're not sure yet. Okay? This is not a daily occurrence or a safety issue. It is something we would like to attempt to prevent with additional soil coverage to the cap. The work completed for the future golf course required the placement of additional soil above the cap of the landfill to help prevent water infiltration and to provide a base for the new development. Cal Recycle does not believe the work previously done fully fulfilled that requirement. Okay, so that means that, you know, we put dirt up there, but obviously it wasn't enough. Okay? Regardless with a future development, whether it's Singpoli or anybody else, it will need to be designed to provide additional soil to provide a better buffer between the cap and the project. Any project that's brought forth will be looked at independently, as a racetrack may have different soil stability needs than a golf course. That's important because, you know, a golf course, you have the ability to settle a little bit more than, let's say, the golf course, or not, excuse me, than the horse track or racetrack. Okay, so there's going to be discussions about that. That's going to have to be engineered, and we've already told, you know, for example, Singpoli, that is their responsibility. That's not the responsibility of the city. All right, so I want to make sure that that was clarified, that it's not posing any risk, that, you know, obviously there wasn't enough soil that was put up there as part of the golf course development, but again, the golf course development never was finalized either.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Since it's under
That's fine.
these agencies. They said city will need to review deed restrictions on site before project can move forward.
Yes.
This will include discussions and approval from United States Environmental Protection Agency.
Yes.
Has the city reviewed any deed restrictions, and have you had those discussions?
We do know those deed restrictions are, so we helped negotiate them back in the days when the original agreement for the development was open. It allows for open space and the golf course development. Okay, so what will need to be done is the other environmental agencies need to sign off, and you'll go back to EPA asking for their authority to sign off as well. We did have that discussion with Cal Recycle and DTSC, and they said that eventually you will have to get EPA to sign off on it as well, which we understood that we would need to do. That has just, we're not there yet. That's going to take some time before we're there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Freeland,
Yes.
if the city council directs you to move forward with the Singpoli project,
Yes.
then that easement, I mean, that project would have to be described, right? And
It would have to go back and renegotiate with EPA, yes. Or give it authorization. We would, regardless, any project other than a golf course or maintaining as open space, will need to be required to go back for a review by EPA.
and all the agencies, right? 'Cause
Oh, yes.
The general sense I got was they liked it, but it was just so, conceptual.
Sure.
That they had no idea what the final designs were gonna look like.
And that's accurate. They're saying that, in concept, they understand the need to redevelop the site. They do want to see a development up there because it does provide additional protections for their site and additional engineering. They just want to have a seat at the table through the entire process, which we have assured them they would.
Right. I thought it was interesting too, just my observation, that one of the agencies said you could even put housing up there with appropriate
They did.
liners and things.
They did do that. What's that? Yeah. We were surprised to hear that the residential was a potential, so yes. Under U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, United States Fish and Wildlife recommends a biologist go out there and map out the area of existing coastal sage scrub, as well as there's some invasive plants that have moved in. We're working with staff right now because there is what's called a Melrose district up there, where there's money's being put aside to help maintain the site up there. We're going to have a biologist go out there, start identifying some of these invasive species, start taking them out to help give the coastal sage a better chance of survival up there. But that's also habitat for the gnatcatcher.
The Melrose covers what area?
I believe it's the entire site. From the Heights, because the Heights Shopping Center pays into it, Bigley Dreams as the city, as well as the BKK properties.
Wow. Expensive.
And so, in addition, in the golf course design, there was actual coastal sage design into the golf course. Then now with a Singpoli design or another developer's design, they're going to have to design habitat for the coastal sage as well. In the discussion with Fish and Wildlife, they mentioned one of the positives, potential positives, is that in the golf course design, there's like little pockets of coastal sage, because you'll have a golf hole in a certain place, then you have a habitat area, then you have another small area. With the potential of the project of this magnitude, you're able to perhaps have consistency in the habitat. Okay, and so that's what's being looked at right now, or not, it has not been looked at, but it needs to be looked at as well as part of the design. And they will be responsible for including that in their design, not just for the coastal sage area, but there's also an area for black walnuts up there as well. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, again, their focus is on the coastal sage and the gnatcatcher, which is an endangered species. We had talked to them about the importance to the city and the residents of having a recreational trail up there. And at first they're like, well, we don't know because we don't want it disturbing the habitat of the gnatcatcher. We shared with them that the intent was to go from Bigley Dreams to Gulfster Park to eventually the county trail system. They're open to it as long as they feel that there's not other devices up there. They don't want any equestrian uses, for example. Everyone chuckles about this because the reason they don't want the equestrian up there is the horse generates waste. That waste has seeds in there that are maybe invasive plants and not friendly to coastal sage. So they don't want equestrian use up there. And they don't want any motorized vehicles up there as well. Because again, they want to have more of a peaceful opportunity so that the gnatcatcher can move through its habitat. Let's see here.
Are there going to be, excuse me, sir, are there going to be areas then that are designated as these kind of ecological sensitive areas, and so then Singpoli will know not to develop, or the city will know?
Absolutely, it'll be built into the design.
Yeah, it'll be built into the design, and Sing Poli would be expected to actually install whatever
Yeah.
those areas are. And then the agencies will give us direction as to, for example, during the nesting season, they may want, a broader area of protection. And so
Right.
that'll be built into the plan and the implementation.
What about an EIR?
Oh, it'll all be in the EIR.
Absolutely.
But you're not going to create these SEAs with the county before, based on the comments?
SEAs?
Significant ecological areas?
Okay.
I
No,
think-
that'll all be part of both, it's sort of a two-sided process. You have the whole EIR process, and in which the agencies are involved. But the EIR comes after you've already designed a project, right?
Right.
And you're looking at impacts from it. So what they have asked for and what we've promised is that we will be engaging them in the front end so that they will have an active role in the development of the design, including the ecological areas, so that we are addressing those needs up front as part of the project.
Okay, but you're not going to do like a designation by the city before the project goes forward to kind of reflect this?
There,
In your master plan or zoning code or something?
There may be, but you can't put the conservation easement, or that, which is kind of what you're talking about. You can't put a conservation easement in place until you know its boundaries. And so we have to have a design where we can do then a meets and bounds description of what the conservation areas are.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other comment that the Fish and Wildlife had that I'm bringing to attention is, most of the time, these areas of habitat don't seem to survive, they find, unless it's a dedicated revenue source to make sure the ongoing maintenance and allowing for the in perpetuity this area is maintained. And so we shared with them that a Melrose had already been created many, many years ago to do that function. And so they were very pleased to see that, because a lot of the other habitats, what happens is you only have a certain time period that you're required to have it established. This will help keep that established time even longer. I think that's it for the report. Let's say specific questions on that. You learned a lot about environment, right? Yes, sir.
Just one question, Chris. The other night at the City Council, the only thing I didn't quite understand, and I thought about the cap. No matter what the depth of the cap is, how much they put on it. But then you have to, when you build on it, you have to, the foundation's got to go through the cap, into the cap.
Right.
So are they going to have to put excess cap, so when they go down in the foundation, it gets to the limit they want to go?
So you're not allowed, and there's some comments in there as well, no pilings, no breaking of the caps. You aren't allowed to put in any kind of pilings or anything. Everything needs to be a temporary structure, or like you said, be engineered where it sits just on top of the cap and the additional soil of the landfill. So they're going to have to do engineering studies to make sure that the weight of the additional cap that they put on there, or additional soil, as well as any structures that are temporary structures, do not cause any of the integrity issues of the landfill. Because as you know, landfills decompose, so they're settling. That's something that they're going to have to be responsible for as well.
Right. So they might have to add excess just
Most likely, yes.
to counteract that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Point out again the areas where they're not allowed to have permanent structures.
Oh, yeah. It's on the top of the landfill and on the slopes of the landfill.
So it's all the blue
All the blue.
and the orange?
No.
Oh, your microphone, Carrie.
No, just the blue.
Sorry.
The blue and not the orange, just the blue.
So, yeah, no permanent structures can go on top of the landfill.
And they did not, they also said they prefer not to, actually, they don't want any of the zip lining to occur through the habitat of the gnatcatcher too. So we made sure of that as well. Any additional questions?
Well, I mean, it just kind of begs the question, there's a lot of verbal promises here, but are you going to present a map? That's what I was kind of getting at earlier, that literally outlines the restrictions that the agencies reminded you of, so that Simpoli has that as a site plan. And they don't have to start over again having these meetings, with some plan that's not feasible.
They've already met with the agencies with us, so they're quite familiar with the restrictions.
So have they revised their plan or
Not
the
as of
concept?
yet, not as of yet, because there's still additional work that they need to do first. So for example, we talked about having a biologist go out there to identify the areas for coastal sage. So until that's done, they have to identify additional areas for coastal sage and how much additional acreage is needed to do so. Once that number is known, they'll be able to incorporate the coastal sage portion into their design. Also, as summarized in here is the fact that DTSC is expecting that they're finishing up their studies. Next is going to be a negotiation of a consent decree with the responsible parties to fund the design of the new leachate system and methane system. And then once the design's done, they'll do another consent decree to actually pay for those improvements. No. This is all part of the landfill responsibilities.
No, but I'm saying Simpoli is going to be negotiating with BKK?
No,
you are.
No, neither one of us. This is the responsibility of the the people that dump waste into the toxic waste landfill. Simpoli is not a part of this process. Okay, so this is something the environmental agencies are doing as part of their ongoing work at the landfill. They've told us that they have no problem working in tandem with Simpoli or the city or any other developer to continue our discussion and dialogue so that a project can move forward at the same time that they're doing their design. So that way they can build their design around a proposed project, or the project can be designed around what their needs are.
One more question, I'm sorry, just about the site. The blue is the top of the landfill. That's
Yes.
part of the Simpoli concept. The orange is the hazardous landfill.
No, the brown is to
I'm
the
sorry.
right.
Okay, that's also part of the Simpoli proposal, all of the orange?
The orange are the successor agency assets that need to be disposed pursuant to the long-range property
But that
management
is
plan.
in-
So
That's probably being acquired.
adjacent to the landfill, but the actual landfill is what is, the top of the landfill is the blue area. And
Yeah.
as you can see, like the ridge lines, that's what the landfill is, like the footprint of the landfill.
Yeah, can you show me the Simpoli plan, like
Yeah.
over that? Is there, okay, so they are,
Right, so one of the things that, to help give clarification, on the toxic waste landfill, Simpoli mentions about putting solar facilities up
Right,
there with
that
solar
was
greenhouses.
approved,
Okay, DTSC, Cal Recycle, actually DTSC is the one, they said that that's gonna have to be a separate discussion with what's called the working party that we mentioned earlier, the people responsible for the Class 1 landfill. That is not part of the properties that the city, the successor agency, or the BKK Corporation has a deciding factor on. That's completely up to DTSC. And so if DTSC authorizes that use, that's different. But at this time, they've been told that that might be a future phase of development if DTSC and the working parties allow it.
okay, and then the yellow areas that are hatched
Right.
below the top of landfill?
Those are other areas they identify as solar, and at this time, I don't believe that that's going to be allowed.
Okay.
Because again, they may need to be into the landfill itself. Plus, it has to be a discussion where the BKK Corporation has to authorize it as well. So if BKK says yes to that, it'll be a separate discussion between Simpoli and BKK.
Okay, and then the green big sections, that's Simpoli, that's the zip line area?
No, the
Or
big
what
green sections is the solar house, the greenhouses. To the right, you're talking about the big green blob or round areas? That's the toxic waste landfill with the solar
Well, that's
greenhouse
the
on top.
solar. Oh, I thought the other thing was. I'm sorry. Okay. So then all that Simpoli is left with is basically the top of landfill and those little, the blue and the pink up there?
The orange and the blue area is in the other diagram.
But in this diagram, it's blue and pink on top. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is where the blue area is, the
Right, I
blue
understand
license.
that. I get that. But then
And then
above,
this is where the orange area that is owned by the successor agency and area is,
just those two small, okay.
yeah.
So question, is the hotel on the toxic part?
No, the hotel is not on any part of the landfill. It's on, to the north of the Class 3 landfill on regular soil or bedrock. It will not be into the landfill itself. It'll be
Is the
off the
ho-
landfill.
The hotel is on north of that track, right? Or
It is to the northwest, I
wait,
believe.
northwest,
It's the white building up there on the
Okay.
northwest
Oh.
corner.
So that's
Off the
not-
landfill.
Not, okay, off the landfill.
Yes.
But the development by them would be all at the same time, or it'd be phased?
No,
or-
it'd have to be phased in.
Okay. So the hotels might go.
Hotels could go faster, but again, the racetrack, again, you're going to have to bring a lot of soil in perhaps for that. So that is something else that's being discussed, because that may have to occur first in order not to be
The racetrack
disruptive.
is where, Mr. Freeland, again?
The racetrack,
Oh, the top of.
yes.
Okay. Might as well do a soccer field for that. Okay. Any other questions? That was a good presentation. I appreciated that. I've been up there several times and I still didn't get it all. Okay.
Well, we've gotten good at it, we talk about it almost all the time out here.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Thanks a lot. All right, colleagues, questions?
Okay, this will go more towards the resolution.
We also have public comment.
Whichever you.
Yeah, if you're going to.
Why don't we hear that first? Isn't that
if you
normal?
have-
And then we'll deliberate? Okay, so we have Mr. Shoemaker?
First of all, the question that comes up is, where did the $4.1 million go? You know, they're playing this game of it wasn't city money. The question I asked from the beginning is, why were these bonds never part of RDA? Because any money that would come in would go to pay them off. So we know they got $4.1 million that did not go to pay off those bonds by playing the game of, let's put the bonds in one place, put the money going somewhere else. So, you know, they're just asking for it. The retention basin. The argument that they're saying, well, we can't put a fence up unless we own the property is a bunch of baloney. The retention basin must be pulled off. If it's a millimeter inside the property line, it's on the property. There's no law that says it has to be exactly on both properties. It'd be like me putting a wall up and saying, well, my neighbor has to pay for it, even though I put it all on my property. You know, so there's no reason that they have to own the property to put up that fence. You know, they said the cap wasn't put on properly and said, well, there's no danger. Nobody said there was danger. It was a simple fact that somebody was hired who we don't know, who did what work that obviously was not sufficient for a golf course. I wholeheartedly understand. It might not be sufficient to put a racetrack up there, but it wasn't properly installed for what its original intent was, a golf course. But there's no documents anywhere for us to go after. Is somebody else responsible for it? Who did it? Why did they do it wrong? Why was it signed off on? Who signed off on it? And is there any way of going back after the person who put the cap on the company? Let's see. The proposed timeline, you know, after 18 months, nobody quite has a timeline yet. Oh, by the way, I still stand by my, I'll pay you $5 for the property. In one of the comments here, the Oversight Board elected not to approve, and it said to pursue agreements with various taxing entities. What are the agreements? This happened back in June of last year or July of last year. Where's the agreements? Because what they're asking you to do, is to take, if the property sold for whatever what was it, 6.7 million or whatever the case may be, to give up $5.8 million. To give up $5.8 million. I don't know any organization, I think the county gets 20%. So the county wants to walk away from $1.3 million? Okay. You know, okay. Let's see. The way this is written, when they told the city council the fiscal impact was 16 cents on the dollar. You notice how they keep saying the proceeds of the sale to the city. That's $3. That means they're giving up 48 cents. You know, just little items like that. The landfill is the city's responsibility. Granted, if St. Pauli wants to do something that isn't part of it, it's got to be taken care of. The city staff's own words. Provides for the sale of property at fair market value. $3 is fair market value. Again, I'll give you 5. Matter of fact, I'll be generous. I'll give you 50. That's much more than $3. And if the fair market value is $3, I'm paying what, about 16 times that? It's not in the best interest of those affected to just walk away from this property. Because right now, is any of the taxing authorities outside of the city paying anything for the upkeep up there? No, they're not. So it's not in the taxing authority's best interest. And by the way, what they're looking for, if you take a look at that, they're asking for about the first $20 million of any money that comes in to go to the city, not to you guys. Not the 9.7, but close to $20 million. Little sneaky, isn't it? So I think you guys should, if you do anything, say you want to, you'll sell it to them for whatever the 6.2 or whatever the value is minus the part that goes to the city, and say then you can do whatever you want with it afterwards. That seems to be kind of a happy compromise. Thank you.
Alfonso, sorry, Alfonso Somilleda.
Good evening. My name is Alfonso Somilleda on behalf of the Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio. I'm here in strong support of the City of West Covina's purchase of the parcel north of the former BBK landfill from West Covina's successor agency. The City of West Covina has been financially responsible for $13.5 million in bonds for the development. The city has been expending millions of taxpayers' dollars without any reimbursement for those expenses. The state of California failed to provide the necessary resources to fund the needed improvements, nor have they been provided reimbursements for their rehabilitation requested by the California Department of Toxic and Substance Control. The Assemblywoman's views of the sale of these properties as a fair way to compensate the City of West Covina for millions of dollars that was invested into the project. And with that, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Moreno.
People would want to know, members of this oversight board, members of the city staff, Phil, why would you as a private citizen even care about what's going on? And I retired in '06, and I went to a city council meeting. It was at West Covina's media center. And you had candidates wanting to be on the city council, and you had candidates wanting to be on the school board. And I heard numbers that surprised me. And one of the questions was asked of the city council about redevelopment. And my question then and the question now was stated to me on a letterhead from Andrew Pazmat, who was the city manager. Chris, you shouldn't have to defend the actions or the statements made by prior officials. But I've gave this body from the letterhead of the city of West Covina when I made a statement here, and Andrew Pazmat sat there. I wanted to know, what is the debt to the taxpayers behind redevelopment? And we were lied to. We were lied to because Andrew Pazmat stated in his response that I was wrong. He said that RDA was paying for itself and not a cost to the general fund. Well, we find that has changed. He then in that same letter said, irregardless of what had taken place, quote unquote, the statute of limitations had been exceeded. I'm a deputy sheriff. The statute of limitations relates only to crimes. So John asked a question, who put the cap on the dump? What were they paid? And any trucking company would have to have an insurance agency. My question, I cannot make a statement, I can ask a question. did Shelley Sanderson, councilwoman for the city of West Covina's husband, rent the grading material or have anything to do with capping that dump? Did the city council at that time refuse to understand that the cap, were they never told that the cap, who signed off from the city management, Andrew Pazmat, said, I get 50% of my salary from redevelopment because I spend 50% of my time on redevelopment. He hasn't taken a 50% cut in pay. There's no more redevelopment. Now Andrew Pazmat is over at another city, and when I get this statement, his answers, I'm going to that city to let him know what that man did to my city. Number one, he lied to us. Number one, I want to know, what is the RDA debt now? What is the redevelopment debt? And is RDA paying for itself? Yes or no? Is the redevelopment in this city, is it paying for itself? And if not, what is the debt to redevelopment? And how much is it costing the general fund to pay the debt that RDA is not paying for itself? I'd like that answer right now.
Let's let you finish your time.
Fine. And you have to understand that. The taxpayers have to know. Was there fiscal mismanagement? Who was responsible to the taxpayers to make sure that the money was spent wisely? John asked the question of the city, what was the amount of bonds taken out to grade the dump, the BKK site? And how was the money spent? And the city gave him an answer, we don't have the documents. You can ask John that if I misquoted him. We need an answer as taxpayers. Is RDA in the city still costing us money, and who benefit by taking out these bonds? Thank you.
Microphone, please.
Would you, I meant I would like, is that okay if we ask Mr. Freeland to?
Mr. Freeland, can I jump in really quickly before I have to flee the room? I have another meeting. I just want to address the statute of limitations issue. I haven't done any analysis of who did that work or when it was done, but clearly it was completed a long time ago. Although there are statutes of limitations for most crimes, there are also statutes of limitation for most civil claims. In fact, for all civil claims. And so let's assume that somehow the city was involved in the contract that placed that cap. I think the answer to that is probably not. I think that would have been BKK at the first instance. So if there was a failure on BKK's part, at that point probably the city didn't even have standing to address it. But nonetheless, it's been in place for a very, very long time. The statute of limitations for a breach of contract is 4 years. The only exception to that is when there's some sort of fraud that leads to a failure or inability to discover the breach. We don't have any evidence of that. So I just wanted to clarify for this body that although I am certain that the agency and the city would love to have somebody to target for whatever the failures are with respect to that cap, it's my view that there probably isn't any legal remedy from a civil perspective.
And you're the city attorney, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I think, I thought that the slide that you showed earlier did in fact show the amount of debt that the city had issued and
It did.
how
It
much
was
has been spent.
$13.5 million was the initial bond issuance.
For the site?
For phase one, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Phase two never began, so no additional bond was issued, just that one.
Okay.
I think what Mr. Moreno referred to, is not just the grading for the golf course, but the grading that happened for Big League Dreams and the Heights and the hills that Charles Company was supposed to develop. So I think I'm interpreting him. I'm not 100% sure that we got the answer for the golf course, but not the site. Again, I'm just trying to interpret, but
Again, I have to go back. We did refinance as part of all the refinancing of the debt of the former redevelopment agency. Last year, you approved the refinancing of all the successor agency debt. So the Big League Dream bonds are now part of that refinanced debt. If the board wishes to get a report on what that Big League Dreams debt was with initial bond issuance, actually.
Mr. Moreno's question on the debt was, what is the entire redevelopment agency debt left?
That would be an issue we have to bring up with the ROPS.
Okay, so
And-
it's in there, isn't it?
It is, and what happens is Mr. Moreno, I think, and I'll speak for him, because he and I have spoken many times about the outstanding debt of the redevelopment agency. Any items that are on the ROPS, that get approved on the ROPS, are funded through the former tax increment. Whatever is left over of that former tax increment goes back to the taxing entities. There are items on the ROPS that the city has contested for many years that should have been reimbursed to the city that were not. So I would say that yes, the loss of redevelopment has cost the taxpayers of West Covina a lot of money.
General fund, so.
General fund.
And today, is that the question? What is the general fund paying for?
Again, it's not paying anything ongoing for redevelopment because redevelopment is gone. General fund pays for today's expenditures. But there are items that we believe we should be reimbursed from the former redevelopment days. One of them we've had on the ROPS in the past, which is the pass-through of the bonds for the Plaza West Covina. We think that could be anywhere between $20 and $30 million of general fund revenue that the city lost out on. In addition, you know, we have had former item on the ROPS with regards to reimbursement of legal fees from the very beginning of the lawsuit between the redevelopment agency and Al Hassan Motors and whatnot. There was a point where they didn't pay those bills, and then they came around and said, yes, we'll pay those bills. But that initial period, there was about $800,000 worth of bills that the city paid for, but the agency never reimbursed the city for. Okay. And so that's still an item of contention. And actually, it's funny, we're going up to Sacramento Tuesday to argue those complaints.
Okay.
I did want to mention one of the other speakers, and I think Ms. Shoemaker kind of alluded to a little bit. I want to make sure everybody understands the landfill itself is not the responsibility of the city. It's the environmental agencies and the BKK Corporation. It's located within our city limits. So we definitely have an interest on it, but we don't have the responsibility to make sure that it's environmentally safe. We want to make sure it is on behalf of our residents. So.
Okay. Colleagues.
Chris, as far as the heights is concerned, it's come up a couple of times, but once that property was sold, basically the city's out of it, right? They had their own developer, did all their own work, right?
Correct, redevelopment. It was done by redevelopment, not by the city. So
redevelopment.
Yeah. So once the project was completed,
yeah,
or actually when and it was signed off, it became private property, private commercial center. There's no more ties to the city.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I, want to preface this with, I live here. And since 2006, I have been more than just living here. I've been involved heavily with the city and working for the betterment of West Covina. And I do regret that I did not get involved earlier. But you do the best you can once you realize that the situation needs to be corrected. And so when you look at how we've been impacted by our public safety and potentially our property values, we need to try to figure out how to turn things around and allow this debt that the residents are burdened with, and it's drawing down on one of the most important things we need to be concerned about, and that's our public safety. How do we protect the businesses that are here? How do we make them comfortable? How do we get other businesses to come, such as Trader Joe's? That was a big ugly thing as to why they left and why they didn't want to come back. We've been begging them for years to come back. And now we're in a worse position to make them feel comfortable and want to come back when you have such a great shortage of public safety, in particular our police. So once we found out in 2006 when this project was starting to get, it was already signed, sealed, and delivered. And it's kind of hard to stop a train because some of us and some people in the audience, we discovered that the Big League Dreams was, as described by staff at that time, negligible. And you see what it's done today. It's not paying for itself. So why are we incurring debts for things that are not going to pay for themselves? That just doesn't make sense. Well, folks who were in power that we let continue to go forward with their vision, it was a gamble. That's what it was. A huge gamble with it's not their money, okay? It's the poor taxpayers' money. And this gamble has been somewhat blocked, meaning the golf course. And not only that, golf courses are dying. And even at that time, they weren't doing great. And so that was supposed to help the taxpayers deal with some of this monstrous debt that was being dumped. Because, just to go back a little bit, the dump was making money when it was operational. But when you live here and you get up to certain days and you smell it, it became something that you didn't want to live with. So the price of losing that money came with a better quality of life. So that's why the dump was closed, and we didn't want to go forward with that dump, poisoning our community, just the air. We're not even talking about other things, just the air. So the dump was closed, that was a good thing. But then the population, the majority of the people, kind of just pulled back. We were happy, we were breathing better when the dump went away. And we didn't realize that it became a different type of dump. It became a money dump. So to try to shorten this, my perspective is I support this project and this sale because the financial situation is dire as we speak, and it's getting worse quickly. Just the financials of the city. And so when you look at this project, you say, okay, well, the city's going to need revenue. Where do we get it? Because we got taxes already coming from every angle. We got to take care of the homeless. That's a tax. We want to take care of our parks. That's a tax. And so to say we're going to add a more tax to bring back up our police to 150, 160 where they should be, that's tremendous. Just think about the police and fire. So to try to tax us out of it, that can't be the only way. So then you say, okay, how do we build? What do we build? The city is pretty much built out. The biggest space we have and available at this time is BKK land, that dump. So I'm looking at, we can take an opportunity because there are a lot of caveats that come with St. Poli going forward. Some things that the residents have to worry about just for their health. I mean, the thing is that I recall is at least 10 years old, the things that are in place now to make it safe, to keep the city and the environment, including the animals and the environment up there, safe from BKK. That's 10 years old. And we've gotten reports that indicated that that's subpar. Those caps and other things are not where they need to be. They're not where they need to be. So it's fine for someone to say that, but we're going to have scientists and so forth that's going to come with this project. So that even if the project fails, we're going to get some benefits. They're going to help us realize, first of all, what do we need up there to help to make things better and stronger as far as safety for the public. And with that, we're going to know what we can build. Okay, so we're going to talk about the safety aspect of it. They can make the public safer. We're going to also learn at this date in 2018, what can we actually put up there? That's a component of this project. So that's going to make everybody in this city clear on, okay, what we can do to rebuild, because everybody here knows with a poor budget, it is hard for the city to service us. It's hard to have services. And so most of us want to keep the police, and I think they want to keep the fire. They don't want to do what Walnut has done, rely on the county for public safety. West Covina wants its own safety. They still want that. But they need to be clear on what it costs and how we can keep it. BKK may help us. It's a part of what we need to do, to research and find out how to get our city back healthy. And so I'm supporting this project, and I'm hoping we can go forward and learn from this. And I attended city council meetings when I was the only person in the audience. Now, rarely do I come to, lately I haven't come to a city council meeting where there's been less than 10, 15 people.
On this issue?
Not just this issue, but I mean every issue. We get people that are involved. And that's the key, is that this is going to give us information to see where we can track going forward, whether we're going to dig in our pocket to do taxes, or whether we can have some developments that we can create and get some funding to help the city get healthy again.
Are you ready to make a motion? I know we have more discussion.
Okay, so my motion is to move this project forward, to approve it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's stop. Want to get that on the table, and then certainly board members. Jessica, yep.
Yeah, but since it's now been moved, shouldn't we have a second before we enter discussion?
I'll second for approval.
Okay, but I want to discuss. We're not ready to vote. Okay, like a few more minutes. Okay, please.
Madam Chair, if I could, I don't want to interrupt Ms. Shoemaker, but there was a point of information I failed to share with you as well. One of the things we wanted to make sure to do our due diligence, we reached out to the Department of Finance about the action. Okay, Department of Finance shared with us that this Oversight Board action is final. They do not review the transactions of any of the sale of long-range, or the properties on the long-range property management plan, unless it's something that influences the ROPS. This project would not do so. I'm paraphrasing, but we actually got a sample, you might say, rejection letter from DOF saying that we don't look into this stuff. The OB is assigned to do this and do this themselves. I'll let Mr. Harper just confirm that.
Yeah, the Department of Finance doesn't concern itself with the transactions, how you dispose of the property after it's on the approved long-range management plan.
But I mean, you have to have a current appraisal by a certified appraisal. There are certain standards that you have to follow. Huh?
Yeah, but not as far as the DOF is concerned. DOF is out of it. DOF has no interest in, that's the responsibility of the successor agency, the potential purchaser, and the Oversight Board.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry about that, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I'm hoping this doesn't take too long. As Mr. Sykes is, I have lived in the city of West Covina since 1991. I got introduced to BKK because when my parents bought our house, we were told it was closing. I got introduced to politics because that didn't happen. And so my parents joined the Raccoons, and that is the organization that got the council elected that agreed to close, force BKK to live up to their agreement to close. And so the site has been a part of my life for 27 years now. And I want to do what is right for the site. I do have a few questions, and just a comment on something that Mr. Sykes said. We are not voting to approve a project. We are voting to sell the property to the city. And so that leads into my first question. What is the city going to do if the Sing-Poli deal doesn't happen with the property when you are then left with all the maintenance for it?
Well, again, there's not much maintenance actually going on up there because it's open space. But we will make the improvements to the basin because that's an interest of the community as well as the fencing. We don't want, like what you can do now, you can actually walk onto the Class 1 landfill from the residential neighborhoods or from the Big League Dreams. We want to prevent that. Ongoing maintenance or the future, I can't answer that. If the Sing-Poli project doesn't happen, which there's a strong possibility it may not because it's a pretty complicated project, then a future city council or this city council, actually it'll probably be a future council because we will have changes perhaps in November, they'll have to make a decision what they wish to do with this property. And that could be a variety of different uses.
Okay, and then I had responded to an email, and in that I asked for the board's counsel to answer what impact it would have that if we sold it for less than fair market value. And really quickly, did the city council and the successor agency approve the resolutions on Tuesday?
Yes, they did.
Okay. So all of the resolutions talk about us selling the property for fair market value. We're not selling it for fair market value.
I suppose it depends on fair market value, as you probably know, is a somewhat elusive term. It doesn't mean what the appraised value is. It means the price between a willing buyer and a willing seller. That is, by definition, fair market value. And there isn't any obligation under the law to sell or dispose of successor agency property at a quote appraised price. Fair market value, again, is a function of what the negotiated resolution is, which is one of the reasons why DOF
But the city's negotiating with somebody who would pay at least the appraised value.
Well, again, I don't know enough about the bond issue. I mean, I haven't looked at the bond documents, so there are some things I would think would normally be protected of the bondholders that probably have impact on the disposition of the property.
Except the bonds are general revenue. They're not tied to the property.
No, they're not general revenue bonds. No,
Yes,
they're
they
leased. They're
Yes, they
basically
are.
it's lease back. That it's that's a way. I want to say this nicely so nobody gets in trouble. It's a way that cities have of financing public projects by agreeing to reciprocal leases and binding the general fund to make the payments. What cities can't do is mortgage property. This is more akin to a mortgage, though. That's kind of the legal nicety around it. And so let's talk about, quote, fair market value appraisal in a more common sense. You have a house in West Covina that you have an appraisal, and the appraisal says it's $500,000. That is theoretically the fair market value, but for a purchaser, if the purchaser assumes the mortgage on the property, it isn't worth $500,000. And that's essentially, I mean, it's not a perfect parallel, but that's essentially what we're talking about here, is a property that's worth $500,000 that has a $600,000 mortgage on it. It's like a short sale from the bank.
Excuse me, but could you really give us the facts? Because I appreciate the analogy, but...
I mean, Chris, there's a real appraisal on record that's a year old, needs to be updated.
Sure.
If I understand it, the value of the appraisal is the fair market. I think it needs to be reassessed, but that they're charging, explain this, where then they're forgiving some of it to pay off the city, right?
Yeah,
so in the end.
Let's take a step back again, that an appraisal is just that. It's what the property would sell at if it had no impediments. That isn't the case here.
But there is an appraisal.
Yeah, and that's what the property, it's like your house. If you're selling your house and the appraisal is for $500,000, or for this property, you're selling it for $6 million.
No.
If the purchaser has to assume debt that's $7 million, that's
Just want to explain
functionally a
that.
short
So
sale.
that's the formula they're using. It's not a dollar. They're not giving it away. They're taking it from our taxing entities, because if you could sell it today, if it was clear of debt, we would expect a distribution.
Yes.
But because it's not clear of debt, I think, at least I personally feel, the city does have to pay itself. I mean, they do have to pay off the debt. The taxpayers are paying the debt. It's a burden, and therefore I'm sympathetic to the formula. But I mean, just to be fair, that's why I don't think the documents are clear.
Then why do we need agreements with the taxing entities?
We don't.
You don't, but we're here. That's who I represent.
But for the last almost year, that's what you've been pursuing at our request. If we didn't need them because these bonds are attached to the property and they'll have to be paid off, or at least partially paid off before they're sold, why have we been negotiating with the taxing entities? Why wouldn't we have just said, hey, it's like, yes, we have. It's in the
Actually, no,
report.
we stopped doing that, and this is why we brought it back to you, so we're not going through that process. We had given direction that we were going to try and do that and make those discussions, but we chose not to do that because of this situation, as Mr. Harper has explained it.
Also, it took me a while to understand that this is not a CRA loan or bond.
Right.
If it were a CRA bond, then
Then it'd be on the ROPS,
yeah.
and this would be an entirely different discussion.
But this is a municipal bond. The debt that, as Mr. Sykes reminds us, was made, taken on by city council because they sold, the public, this, luxury golf course situation. And so the city's paying the debt right now. Annually, we just saw that, $565,000. Whatever. I don't know if I got that right. But what's the annual debt?
Yeah, but that was basically the number.
400 to 500,000.
Yeah.
It changes every year because it's a variable interest rate, but last fiscal year that we have the actuals for was fiscal year 16-17. It was $564,675.
And in answer to the second half of your question, which you haven't asked yet, if you want to talk about Tres Hermanos, we can do that. It's just really apples and oranges. The Tres Hermanos Ranch, as I think probably most of you know, is basically 2,400, 2,500 acres that was owned by the redevelopment agency and City of Industry. They've owned it since the late 70s, prior to the incorporation of Chino Hills and Diamond Bar. And now the property is within the cities of Chino Hills and Diamond Bar. The redevelopment agency, the Oversight Board, actually was offered $100 million by a developer to purchase the property. And the cities of Diamond Bar and Chino Hills were happy about that. At the Oversight Board meeting, the city offered $41 million for the property, subject to a covenant that it wouldn't be used for anything other than a public purpose. That was, the cities were unhappy, but there was no question that that was permissible under the law, period. It became a little dicey when it was discovered that the City of Industry actually intended to put 900 acres in a solar farm, which would generate funds to the City of Industry, presumably. Then Chino Hills and Diamond Bar were very unhappy. First went to DOF and said, set this aside. DOF mistakenly said, we'll review it. And then after they realized what had happened, they said just what Chris has said, we don't have any authority to review it, we're not going to. There are, however, lawsuits filed by both cities. The fair market value really isn't so much the issue. It's the CEQA and the application of the city's zoning and planning ordinances. Don't know where it's ultimately going to go, but hopefully they simply negotiate some resolution. But it's so much apples and oranges that there's no real fair comparison to what we're talking about here.
Okay. And then my next question is the resolution talks about an unrecorded license agreement. What is that, and are there any others?
There's one license agreement, that's the top deck, which is BKK property. Since it's part of the landfill and the property, it can't be sold. Okay. And so it's just to allow any other user to use that property.
Okay, so.
But again.
Sing Poli would be.
Utilizing, well, if it does, Sing Poli would take over that. No, the license would still be retained by the city.
But we would license.
We would allow them the use of that property, yes.
Okay. And then there are no others?
No, there's not.
And so I just want to be really clear before I vote on this. As our council, you are saying that the Oversight Board has the authority to allow the successor agency to sell these properties to the city for $1 a parcel.
Yes, legal authority too, yes.
Thank you.
I have my feeling is I would not approve that motion if that's what these were being sold for. It's my understanding that there's going to be an appraisal that's going to set a value for the land, and then the city is going to, can you explain that? I'm not ready to give the land away for $1. I thought that we were helping, because there was a mortgage on the property, that we were kind of giving a, transferring the value of the land over to the city so that they can get out from under the debt.
And essentially the city's going to do what you suggested, is get a current appraisal, try and negotiate a sale, which may or may not.
I don't think that's clear. I don't think that our motion is clear on that.
Yeah, and then that money comes back for the retirement of the debt.
Okay, I need Mr. Freeland to give me some language here so that it's clear that we're not giving the land away for $1.
I think it's part of the resolution, sections 2 and sections 3.
It doesn't say that, miss. It's just approving and authorizing the sale of 3 agency parcels. It doesn't say at a market rate, based on a new appraised value. At what time?
It's not. That was a private discussion we had yesterday that you were considering adding to the resolution.
I would like to, but I mean, because why do people keep saying it, we're giving them away for $1? Where does it say that?
We're selling.
Because the title of the in order to sell property in California, there has to be consideration, and the consideration in this case is $1. That's what will be recited when the property transfers.
Okay, I'm not.
But it's subject to conditions, and the condition that the Oversight Board wanted imposed is that any proceeds that the city gets from selling it, assuming they do, it goes back to retirement.
Okay, it's not clear. It doesn't say that here, right?
I think section 3 does.
Because it says, as a condition of the sale to the city shall apply any and all sales proceeds associated with the future sale of the properties and license to pay off or pay down the 2004 bonds.
Okay.
After payment of the 2004 bonds in full and reimbursement to the city of all payments made by the city on the bonds, principals, interest, or costs, any sale proceeds remaining shall be paid over to the Los Angeles County auditor controller for distribution to the affected taxing agencies. And like you, I had a little bit of an issue with this section because my original concern was not that, I understand $1 each parcel, city then sells it. And so my concern was that they don't do something like, okay, Sing Poli, we're now going to transfer it to you for $3, and you take over doing all of these things. And so what I had wanted added was something along the lines of including in-kind or offset. Basically, if Sing Poli agrees to do $10 million worth of stuff, the city somehow finds a way to put $10 million on those bonds and the rest to the, so I think I know where
we're
you're
going.
heading.
Okay, I'm afraid of that because I think Simpoli as a developer is going to probably need to make 100% of those investments because they're going to 100% of the profit. But I would like to go back to the land value because that's really all that's before us today. Like you, I I envision a new development down the road. You might take 15 years just to get through your entitlements and regulations, who knows, right? And by then, it could be a whole different economy, market, and the horse racing sounds like a golf course does to us today. So I would just want to make sure that at the time the land is sold to Simpoli or to, we're only transferring it now and then you're going to sell it, is that right?
Yeah. I mean,
Later?
and keep in mind that the city takes some amount of risk in this, in that everybody's kind of assuming that we're going to get the appraised value out of this current developer. But it could be that the city continues to make the debt service on the bonds for the next 20 years because the property has no real saleability, notwithstanding it.
Or it could tank, certainly, in the next couple years because of the economy and then come back up. But okay.
As long as it comes back up.
I was going to add, there's nothing saying that, the city councils change every couple of years. This project has not even close to be finalized. A new city council could come in and want a different use altogether.
Okay.
So the idea is, I respect the Oversight Board to ask for, not to tie up where the city doesn't have the ability, even if they don't wish to sell it, that they want to maintain it for some other purposes too.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, the city could decide, you know what, for the $500,000 a year we're paying, that's a pretty nice, I mean, if there's a way of doing it environmentally, a park. Keep it open space, because we like open space. I mean,
that sounds like 2012. That's so 2012, Mr. Harper. Okay, so we have a motion on the table and a second. I would just like to make an amendment with regard to, at the time an appraisal is done, that it be fresh within 12 months of the time of sale to get the highest property
I guess you could say as a condition of any sale that there has to be
a new appraisal.
An appraisal that's effective the date of the sale.
Sounds good. Okay. Yes. You accept that?
Yes.
Friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If I may, just for clarification, who made the initial motion?
Fred.
And Fred, you accept that friendly amendment? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
I'd just like to add my comments for the record here. My main concern naturally is to get the debt paid off, and we seem to be covering that fairly well. I recall, I mean, she mentioned she lived here since '91. I've lived here since 1958, so I've seen a lot of different things here. I remember former mayor called Ken Chappelle, named Ken Chappelle, said this is probably the worst thing that West Covina has ever done, is make a dump out of this, and that's before the toxic dump was actually put into effect. Now we have the #1 toxic dump in the U.S. in West Covina. We're the proud owner of it. Just imagine the gold mine we'd have here if this property was sitting here with nothing like that on it. But we have it, so we got to play with it. But I want to see something happen there, and this, I mean, there's so many issues right now with it that's they're questionable that we really can't go say anything about who's going to build what and when they're going to do it. So I would like to go forward with the try to sell it to the city and see what happens from there. I don't see the appraisal coming in today that enough to cover the debt that we have. So therefore there'd be no money to distribute to anybody. But there'd be a start. So I think my better judgment says to go ahead and support the issue today and take it from there and hope it works out for West Covina. Thank you.
Thanks, thank you.
Madam Chair, we're having the attorney write language to be included as amended resolution.
I can add just that thankfully we weren't at districts when BKK was still open, because I doubt there would have been 3 members willing to give away over $1 million a year in revenue to close it. So I'm glad we're at a different point in time.
Shall we call for the vote?
Do you want to read the verbiage, or you allow the attorney to do as?
Oh, you ready? Okay.
Just a second.
Give it a second.
Yeah, thinking about it.
If you want to look at your staff report, the resolution itself is rewriting section 3 of it.
Okay, that's what I'm not finding. It's not, I got the minutes.
if you go to section 3, what I'm adding, and I think this is what you intend, it starts, as a condition of the sale to the city, comma, prior to the sale of the property to a third party, comma, the city shall conduct an appraisal with an appraisal date as of the date of the sale, period, and then capital T, the.
Are we ready to take a vote then?
Yes.
Okay. Shall we do a roll call?
Ms. Morales will do that roll call.
Okay. Board Member McDonald? Okay. Board Member Chavez?
Aye.
Board Member Stewart?
Aye.
Board Member Sykes?
Aye.
Board Member Shoemaker?
Aye.
And then Chairperson Sedkin?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Motion is approved.
We did get the calls from the supervisor. Okay, I think we are there any other board member comments? Is this our final meeting? Are we bidding adieu to the?
At this time, we believe so.
That's what we thought
You never know what the state of California will do.
Okay.
One, and two is we are going up to Sacramento, as mentioned, Tuesday to talk to Department of Finance about the ROPS and some of the denials they have. If for any reason they turn their decision around, they ask us to do an amendment, we may have to come back to you.
Okay, for sure.
So we'll reach out to you. But with that, if this is our last meeting, we thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you.
We'll send you a notice about the reunion.
Yes.
Only if you've been serving since 2012.
Just in case we have unfinished business, what's the process from here on? I know that goes to the county, right? And who's on that board?
We don't know.
That we don't know at this point. But the board will a board will be formed, and those people appointed to do essentially what you're doing, but for everybody in the county, or at least in the areas that they're responsible for.
Olga, do you want to say anything? We have the CEO's office here from the county.
Currently,
The mic.
usually my voice carries. As you know, the trailer bill has authorized the counties to has authorized the Los Angeles County Auditor Controller to signify a county department to take over the facilitation of the consolidated oversight boards. The Auditor Controller has entered into a MOU with the executive officer of the Board of Supervisors, Commission Services, and that is the section that I come from. So the workflow and the process is currently being worked through the Auditor Controller, through the CEO and the Executive Office and Commission Services. And we are working with the various entities for the appointments. The Board of Supervisors still has to make their appointments. The City Selection Committee has to make their appointment for the city. The union representatives has appointed their people. The school district has appointed their people. We're also waiting for the chancellor of the city colleges to appoint their people. So that seems to be moving forward. City Selection, I believe, is going to have a meeting May 8th, I believe.
Can you there's going to be 5 oversight boards?
There will be 5 oversight boards for the County of Los Angeles, and it will be by supervisorial district. And the CRALA is going to go to the 3rd district. So the 3rd district will have their 4 cities plus CRALA as the City of Los Angeles. They will also have the Community Development Commission. So it's in the works. We will be sending out information to the different city clerks And we will be providing a webinar, which I am designing now.
Nice. And so how long does that continue?
Well, we're hoping, as long as there is business with the successor agency, the oversight boards will exist.
Okay. So yes.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, talk to your supervisor, right? Okay, thank you very much. Our meeting is adjourned.